The Gospel for today's feast of the Epiphany of our Lord reads, Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 2. Many of you have probably heard of Venerable Bartholomew Holzhauser. He was a Catholic priest and prophet of the 17th century. And also, as many of you know, he outlined 7 ages of the church, which some people say refer to the 7 candlesticks of the apocalypse. The 4th age was the Middle Ages. The 5th age began an age of schism and heresy, beginning with the Protestant revolt. However, Venerable Bartholomew shows that this 5th age will include not only attacks from without, like Protestantism, but also an infiltration of heretics within Rome. He wrote nearly 400 years ago, quote, God will permit this great evil against his church. Heretics and tyrants will come suddenly and unexpectedly. They will break into the church while bishops, prelates, and priests are asleep. They will enter Italy and lay waste Rome. They will burn the churches and destroy everything. What does it look like to apply Holzhauser's prophecies of the 17th century, his 17th century? If we look at that last quote, especially through spiritual eyes instead of a physical attack on Rome, well, when we connect this to the messages of Our Lady of Good Success and Our Lady of La Salette and Our Lady of Fatima, the picture becomes pretty clear. Now, of course, no one knows what the future holds, but Mary's words in all of those locations I just named, as well as the current events we see in Rome, would strongly suggest we are on the cusp between the 5th age of confusion and the 6th age of peace. Now, many say that 6th age of peace, will include the angelic pope and the great monarch who will reunite and rebuild what was destroyed by modernists and Muslims, respectively. Our Lady of La Salette said this age would only last 25 years before the final Antichrist comes on the scene. That is, that 6th age of peace would be only 25 years. Now, of course, this notion of an era of peace clearly coordinates with Our Lady of Fatima's promise of an era of peace also. However, Mary at Fatima was clear that this era of peace would only happen when the Pope, with all the bishops of the world, validly consecrates Russia to her Immaculate Heart. No word games, no Freemasonic code for population control via climate change alarmism, just a simple consecration of Russia, not the whole world, to her Immaculate Heart. And when the Pope does this, who I personally believe will be the next Pope, this will kick off the 6th age of the Church, that is, the era of peace. Experts in Marian theology much greater than me say this will convert Russia quite rapidly. Therefore, Russia is extremely important in this equation to anyone who admits Fatima was a real apparition, as do I, and I'm sure you do too. Both my friends, Father Kramer and Father Isaac Maria Relea, have said that the Russian Orthodox Church and other Eastern Orthodox will only have to renounce the rejection of the Filioque and a few other errors to come into union with the Roman Catholic Church. I add to that after all the damage we've done to ourselves in the West over the past 100 years, and especially over the past 10 years, this will indeed take a miracle, probably more global than Our Lady of Guadalupe, to convince the Russian Orthodox to come into union with this Roman Church, who they have been ripping on incessantly, by the way, and rightly, this year of 2023 and 2024 due to fiducia supplicans. But when that future Pope consecrates Russia, we can be sure God will intervene to show the Eastern Orthodox that all must be in union again. Yes, the Russian Orthodox Church never had a Vatican II, so they will be able to keep all their old rite Eastern sacraments if this miracle takes place. And yes, every liberal Catholic and neocon Catholic and traditional Catholic who study church history admits the Orthodox sacraments are valid, so that's not even a controversial point. But what I'm asserting here is that the Eastern Orthodox will only have to renounce a few heresies to again recognize Rome, quote, presiding in charity, end quote, over the entire church, as Saint Ignatius of Antioch, an Eastern Father, wrote around the year 100 AD. And so, like today's Epiphany octave in the West, called Theophany in the East, there may be a miraculous illumination of faith in those who would be, say, analogous to non-Jewish magi, namely the Eastern Orthodox churches. Now, of course, my analogy breaks down since the magi were pagans and the Eastern Orthodox are obviously Christians. But the similarity I'm pointing to here is that Jews in the first century and Catholics in the 21st century sleep through the signs God is sending, while what happens in Russia? They are banning sodomitical parades and trying to reduce their child slaughter rate. Now, I'm not saying it's sufficient to be Russian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox, but it is worse to adhere to the current Vatican apparatus promoting Pachamama worship and sodomitical blessings. So my prayer is that all Christians may soon again be called holy and Catholic and Orthodox and Apostolic, just as they were in the first few hundred years, except for a few heretics who aren't true Christians. But of course, as we look forward, this will only happen under a traditional pope who validly consecrates Russia with all the bishops to the Immaculate Heart of Mary without any silly additions like "and the whole world." When that happens, I believe many Russian Orthodox will become Eastern Catholic of the Russian Rite quite rapidly. Now, of course, I don't know, but I suspect that before the year 2030, either Jesus returns in glory or we have that angelic pope to unite 1 billion Christians under Rome. So while Western Catholics sleep tonight, and even many traditionalists do damage control for all the heresies we see being pumped out across the globe on the international media, quoting the Vatican, the Eastern Orthodox may return to the true faith tomorrow. I really believe God and Our Lady will do this miracle when Russia is consecrated accurately. Also, I believe many of the Bible-believing evangelicals will come into union with that traditional angelic pope, bringing us back to ancient Christianity, which is apostolic Catholicism, especially if God works these global miracles. I mean, even today, so many evangelicals want to come into union with Rome, but they say they cannot because it seems so woke. I'm not talking about the evangelicals of the 80s who hated Roman Catholicism. I mean the people who want to become Catholic and they can't because they see how woke the Vatican is. And so when this miracle happens, perhaps many pagans and infidels will also accept Christ and apostolic Catholicism. But what becomes of modernist Catholics if this happens soon, as these consciences are potentially illuminated? Well, they very well might accept true apostolic ancient Catholicism, also known as traditional Catholicism, or like the complacent Jews of the first century, progressive Catholics might reject the future traditionalist angelic pope prophesied at the next stage of the church. Yes, such a great leader might abrogate Vatican II and the 7 new sacraments, while admitting they were valid, because, Our Lady of Good Success speaks of a prelate who will restore the church. And restore implies something will have been lost when that prophecy was made a few hundred years ago. Perhaps some modernist Catholics will accept the truth at the next stage of the church, but many will not if the church goes into a full external schism over these current issues of sexuality and liturgy, considering she's already at an internal schism, even as many non-traditional Catholics admit. Because things are currently at a fever pitch in heresy in the Catholic Church right now, many believe we are at that liminal zone between the 5th age of confusion and the 6th age of peace, and I happen to be one of those people. This is clear from the fact that Fatima has not been obeyed, for one, from the top of the hierarchy in rejecting a clear demand for the consecration of Russia, to ignoring Fatima's warnings that immodesty would lead many souls to the flames of hell. Few Catholics realize we are in pre-apocalyptic times. So unless Jesus returns very soon, I believe the next pope will consecrate Russia and we will see global miracles of conversion to the Catholic Church, that same church that's currently being mocked as woke and liberal and communist by God-fearing Eastern Orthodox and even evangelical Protestants. But according to Our Lady of La Salette and other Marian prophecies, it seems we will soon have 25 years of peace and millions of conversions. And like first century Judaism, many lukewarm Catholics, those who claim to be card-carrying members of the true religion but don't have supernatural faith, just like we may have seen in the first century, might leave the true faith. And just like first century evangelization, when Paul left behind the Jews to bring the true faith, the new Christian faith, the new Catholic faith to Gentiles, so many of those not currently in our Catholic tribe may enter the Church of God. In fact, if the sixth age of the Church is only 25 years, this means you might see the next Pope abrogate Vatican II and a certain alleged conclave, as well as consecrate Russia. This will bring tremendous blessings upon the entire church in the world. However, humanity doesn't do well with blessings. The fathers and the prophets are clear that people will forget God's blessings in that sixth age of the church and return to horrible depravity within 25 years, leading to the horrendous but short seventh age of the church. Of course, only the final Antichrist will claim to have the final human-based solution. The Bible is clear he will reign for only 3.5 years. Enoch and Elijah will return from the atmospheric heaven to make many converts of Gentile and Jew, respectively. Finally, those two will be killed by the Antichrist. However, at that moment, Christ himself will return to earth, slay the final Antichrist, and bring all those in grace, including many newly baptized Jews, to heaven. But again, since Our Lady of La Salette said the sixth age of the church is only 25 years, this means that you could see the angelic pope in the sixth age and the Antichrist at the beginning of the seventh age and the glorious return of Christ at the end of the seventh age, all before the year 2050, since we know that last age is only 3.5 years long. Or perhaps Jesus doesn't return until the year 20,578. Or perhaps we're simply coming up at the very end of the world in 2024 without any of these different ages of the church. Some people say that when Mary said at Fatima, "In the end, my heart will triumph," she meant literally in the end, as in only at the end of the world would her heart triumph over all. After all, it was also Our Lady of La Salette who said, "Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist." It doesn't appear we need to wait another 30 years for that prophecy to be fulfilled. Obviously, I don't know what happens from the year 2024 to 2050, but Venerable Holzhauser's 7 errors of the Church seem pretty convincing in light of the current apostasy in Rome and all the approved Marian apparitions of the past few hundred years, that there's some truth or great truth or total truth to Venerable Bartholomew's prophecies. In fact, Bartholomew, as well as the Marian apparitions of the past few hundred years, they both predict an era of heresy would be followed by an era of peace, unity, and we don't know if that's in heaven or on earth. Most traditionalists believe it's on earth, and that does seem to line up to the 7 ages of the church. Because of Fatima, we know this must begin with Russia if it happens, which is already ripe for conversion. Like the enlightenment of the pagan magi in the East 2,000 years ago, there may be a theophany, a revelation, a manifestation to the East, soon to unite all Christians in the near future, despite all the odds that we currently see in the Western Church that to human eyes seems to be collapsing. God will use this for his glory and the salvation of souls.